A little bit about myself. My name is Abiud Montes. Abi, A-B-I-U-D. Abiud is Hebrew. People always make it mess up, but people are getting really good at it. So Abiud is in the Bible. It's in Matthew chapter 1, verse 13, the genealogy to Christ, as it goes down in so-and-so begot. Abba is father. Abiud is father of strength. And I'm thankful for my parents picking that name because I've been through some tough times, and I needed the strength, and I'm thankful for that. A little bit about myself. I served 30 years in the United States Marine Corps. In those 30 years, I was told from the beginning when I got out of high school in North Miami Beach Senior High, you'll never be a Marine, you're too short. At the time, I was like 5'4". I wrestled at 103 pounds in North Miami Beach, so people would say you're not gonna make it. And a lot of times people do talk in your lives that are negative. There's some people that say you'll never do this or you'll never do that. And that's something you say, yeah, watch me. And I went to 2 wars. I went to Desert Storm 91, and I was about 19 years old. I also went to Iraqi freedom. In 2003, the initial push to Baghdad, the 21-day march up to Baghdad. But today, I'm gonna be talking about Desert Storm. The reason why I'm talking about Desert Storm is because a lot of people know it as the Forgotten War. As I travel, a lot of times I talk to people and youth today and talk about Desert Storm, and it's like, what's that? I mean, it's not even, if it is in a history book, it's probably a paragraph now, not even maybe a sentence, who knows? There's not much about it. But I want to share about the Marines from Miami, because tow company, basically out of Miami, anybody ever been to Miami Zoo, Metro Zoo?
Yes.
Well, now it's called Miami Zoo. There is a building there. It's a World War II barracks, and in that barracks basically is a museum today. As a matter of fact, at the end, I'm going to show you a slide. We are actually having the 35th anniversary of Desert Storm at this building. So when I was 19 years old, I decided to join the United States Marine Corps. I woke up at about 4 in the morning. My recruiter picked me up, took me down to Miami MEPS, got down there, checked into the military processing, got on a plane that afternoon, finally got to South Carolina, was in the holding area with other Marines showed up. But by the time we got on Paris Island, it was about 03 in the morning. So I've already been up almost 22 hours at the time, and I went on the yellow footprints. The yellow footprints are synonymous for the Marine Corps because that's the first thing basically you see once you get off the bus. Before the drill instructor's yelling at you and telling you get off my bus. If everyone's ever seen that dramatic film or that series, it's true, yes. They do tell you get off the bus and you better move. So I stood on those yellow footprints. I was 19 years old, and that's where it began. It was September 11th, 1989. And yes, I remember looking out of the barracks. I was in 1st Battalion, Platoon 1105. Delta Dogs, they called us. And I remember looking out the window and looking at the parade deck on Paris Island, and still that question in my mind, would I ever graduate? Because people said, you'll never make it to the Marines, let alone become a Marine. It is a small society. It's called the few, the proud, the Marines. Not many people, when they make a decision, would want to go or don't really sign up. The day I left MEPS in Miami, they said all the Navy guys stand up, and there was about 30 people, all the Air Force, there was quite a bit, about 35, all the Army, and there was probably like 150. And they said, okay, Marines stand up. And when I stood up, I was the only one standing in the room. And immediately the entire crowd, all these young men and women that were there, they started to laugh at me. And I looked and I said, well, they told me I was going to Paris Island. So I said, why not sign up? I've never been to Paris Island. And I sat down, and that thought's like, wow, everybody in this room, over 300 people, and there was only one person, that was me. So yes, we are the few, we are the proud, we are the Marines. I became a tow gunner. A tow gunner's tube launched for the T. O is optical sighted, wire guided system. As you look at this tow missile, the missile's coming out of the tube, the backblast area. We are on a Humvee. And right up here, you see these systems. So basically what it is, it's a wire guided system, but it has a day sight, a 13 power scope, and it has a night sight. So basically, you can see at nighttime, it can be complete darkness, and it picks up the heat. So when I look through the scope, I can see the heat, the outline of a tank, because it radiates heat. So I'm able to shoot this in the middle of the darkness. I'm able to shoot if there's clouds or smoke or fog. Doesn't matter. I can use that night sight to pick up the sensitivity of the enemy vehicle, and I can take it out. This tow missile goes through 36 inches of steel or 4 feet of reinforced concrete. It can travel 3,750 meters. So it can reach out and touch someone. That's what I used to say. That was my weapon in Desert Storm and also in Iraqi Freedom. So I was, that T for tow, right? A tow gun. I transferred that into a SWOT analysis, but I use it in everyday life. A T every day is a threat. I'm currently speaking on 2 other topics other than the history about my career. I share on leadership, and I travel all over the country, and I speak on how to treat your employees, how to speak to them, different things like that. I also talk about situational awareness. I just did one here in Broward. I'm doing one in 2 weeks down in Doral, and it's called Situational Awareness to include active shooter. So I do that training as well. I've done it at synagogues, I've done it at churches, community, different events. And that's something that, 3 days ago in UK, 11 people just got stabbed. So we talk about your situational awareness. If you're traveling, what to do in the hotel. If you're in the airplane, where to sit on the plane. If you're at the hotel, you're at the movie theater, you're at the mall, you're going to Disney World, wherever you may be, there's different things. It's just your situational awareness, just to be aware, just in case somebody decides to do something. So I am currently teaching on those subjects, and it's going very, very well. I've gotten a lot of positive feedback, and a lot of people are calling me to do that training. So a T is a threat. Every single day, we deal with threats. Sometimes you're driving right here on Hollywood Boulevard, somebody cuts you off, right? With every threat, there's an opportunity. There's an opportunity to escape a bad situation. Look at this room, right? We look at the room, if something happens, we have an exit to the right, we have an exit over here. We have different areas that we can go. There's always an opportunity to escape a bad situation in anything that you may go through in life. A weakness. I always tell people we all have weaknesses. There's nobody in this room say, I know it all, because I'm going to tell you that's a lie if you say that. On the leadership part, a good leader is not one that says, I can do it all, but recognizes his weaknesses and surrounds himself with people that can help him move forward about his weaknesses. When I was in the military, if I noticed somebody struggling with something or a situation as a leader, I would go, hey, I know you're having a difficult time with that. You know what? Humble myself, said, I went through those same situations. I had a weakness. And when you have a weakness, what you have to do is recognize, work on that, and you make that weakness your strength. One of the biggest weaknesses I had when I first joined the fire department, I got hired in 1994, City of Hollywood. I retired last year as a lieutenant. So people say, how can you do 30 years in the Marines, 30 years in the fire? Well, I was active duty reserves, and then when I got hired, I would do training throughout the year for different programs in the reserve and individual Marine augmentee as later went on. And one of my biggest weaknesses was putting a tube down somebody's throat and helping them breathe. That was so difficult. When I first started to learn to take the laryngoscope and take this tube and put it down someone's throat and pass the vocal cords and all that training, I would be at the lab day after day after day and practice. I would practice on a pig because they had the pig, you know, the same esophagus area resembles the human, and I would practice. And one day I was in Hollywood and there was a bad situation and the families were yelling, saying, "Save my family member, save him, save him." I was able to take that laryngoscope, lift up the tongue, see the vocal cords, put that tube inside, and start breathing for that person. And we were able to save their life. Mamma Mia's on the circle, same thing. A lady was choking, the spaghetti, she was blue, she passed out. We showed up on scene. I immediately opened her mouth, removed the spaghetti, put the tube down her throat, and started to breathe for her. By the time we got to Memorial Hospital, the lady looked at me, tears in her eyes, she gave me a thumbs up. So something that was my weakness became my strength to help save somebody's life. So that is TOES. Threats, opportunities, weakness, and strengths. Or tube-launched, optical-sided, wire-guided system, which that was my job in the United States Marine Corps. If you have any questions, I know Karen said save them to the end, but if as I'm speaking and you think of something, just write your note down, and I'd be, you know, if you can't remember, I can always, we'll interrupt and I'll answer the question, but if you can hold to the end, perfect. But if you have something that you're thinking about, remember, and I'll answer the question as best as possible. You have a question? Go ahead, sir.
Yeah. How many missiles does your craft hold?
So the TOW missile, you see the vehicle right there. In the back, we can hold 6 missiles and 1 already set up. So a total of 7 missiles before we have to be resupplied. And we also have different type of weapons. Like I had a squad automatic weapon, which is a SAW. It's a machine gun. I would also, it's not on this here, but I would attach it to the top. So I would able to have that as additional firepower. And of course we have other vehicles with Mark 19s and 50 cal machine guns. So a 50 caliber, size of half a dollar, 50 caliber, and it's a machine gun, and it can do some damage if you need to. That answer your question, sir? Okay. So what I'm going to talk about is the Miami Marines. This is a picture in front of the museum. Like I said, this year, January 17th, I'm the president of the reunion committee, and we're having a reunion. I'm going to send you the information, Karen. It is kind of far. It's all the way down to Miami, but this is open to everybody. We're opening it to every single person. It doesn't matter if you are military or not. The museum, we have paid, it's $10, but we have paid for everybody to come in for free. And that day we're going to talk about Desert Storm. We're going to honor the men and women that served. We're going to present them with an American flag for the family members of the Marines that are no longer with us. We're going to present them a coin, which I have a coin there that we made to honor the Marines. And it's just going to be focusing on the Marines from Miami that were deployed out of Miami, 240 Marines. And we're going to share a little bit about the history about them. So when I got called up, it was Thanksgiving night. I got a phone call from Staff Sergeant Starboard, says, I don't know if you've been watching the news, but Saddam Hussein just attacked Kuwait, and they took over basically that area and that region. And they said, at the time when that happened in 1990, I was a reserve Marine. I was not active duty. Meantime, I went to Paris Island. I graduated November 10th. January that year, I went to MCT, which is Marine Combat Training. For Marines that have been there, we call it Marine Custodial Training because we do clean from the moment we wake up till the time we go to bed. And then I went to what's called SOI, School of Infantry. And that's where every Marine is a rifleman. It doesn't matter if your job is if you're a cook, or you're driving a truck, or you're administration, every single Marine goes through this training, so everyone is considered a rifleman. All the other branches don't do that. Whatever your job specific, if you are in the Air Force and you're an air traffic controller, that's all you focus. You never go out and shoot a rifle, you never throw a grenade, you never do all these different things. In the Marines, every single person, male and female, they've been doing this from the beginning of time. It hasn't just changed recently. Everyone does the same training. We all do the same training. And that training is 4 weeks of you learn to break down from the M16 to the Mark 19 machine gun to the 50 caliber to the tow gun to everything. Did my screen go off? Mine's on, but the, oh, there it goes. Oh, wait a second. There it goes. Okay. So we were told as Miami Marines that we were just, since we were reserves, we were going to go and take the place as the active duty goes over to the war. We were going to take their spot in Camp Lejeune. And then we got the word that says, oh, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to go to California in 29 Palms. 29 Palms was a base by the Army. They gave it to the Marines because they hated it. It was the worst thing ever. And if you don't know anything about the Marines, we always get the leftovers. We're called the red-headed stepchildren. We get the worst of the worst. They gave us this Camp Lejeune, or not Camp Lejeune, they gave us 29 Palms, and it's in the middle of the desert of California. There's nothing there, and guess what? Out of the workup after all the wars that just happened, Afghanistan and Iraq, it was the busiest, most productive base in the entire world. It resembles Iraq and Saudi Arabia in that area. It's 130 degrees during the day. If there's no casinos, there's no reason to be there. Just want to let you know. And it's about 40 to 30 degrees during the night. So it's extremely hot and then extremely cold, that region. It's very brutal on the body. So we were told we were going to go to California. So we're like, okay, next thing we know, guess what? We're not going to California. We end up in Camp Lejeune. So when I get to Camp Lejeune, there was a general called General Gray. He was the only commandant in the Marine Corps that never dressed up in a dress uniform for his photo. General Gray would always wear fatigues, and his photo, if you go to the Marine Corps Museum in Quantico, Virginia, you'll see every single general from the beginning of time till today. They're wearing their dress blue, metal uniform, beautiful. He's the only one in combat fatigues. And he is a true combat Marine. He's what we call an 03, which I was an 03. An 03 is someone that is a combat veteran, or I'm sorry, an 03 is a combat, just deals, he's not motor T, he's not admin, he's strictly an 03. We call a grunt. You know, they say in the Marine Corps, the grunts, everybody works for us. So here I am in this formation. I'm actually somewhere in here. And this is a regimental formation. It is one of the largest formations ever done since many wars. And while the general was speaking up here at the podium, he said, look to your left, look to your right. Everyone here will be ending up going to war. And we're like, what? Wait a second. They told me I was reserves. They said we were just going to stay here. We weren't going over to Iraq. Now we're hearing different things. And I said, we're reserves, you know? And then he said something significant. He said, look at your uniform. My uniform says U.S. Marines. He said, it doesn't say Reserve Marines. It doesn't say IRR, Individual Marines. It doesn't say IMA Marines, Individual Marine Augmentee. It doesn't say Active Duty Marines. It says U.S. Marines. He says, you're Marines and you're going to combat. I was like, wow, I guess we're going. So everything has changed. You know, from saying, oh, you're not going, you know, you're going to California. No, you're going to go to Camp Lejeune and stay there. And while the active duty goes over, you'll be fulfilling their spot. Nah, that didn't happen. I found myself on Christmas Day. I say Christmas Eve. We left Cherry Point, North Carolina. We landed in Aviana, Italy. And we ended up in Saudi Arabia. It was my first transatlantic flight ever in my entire life. I was on an airplane for 24 hours. I don't know if you've ever been on a plane that long. I've been on a plane for about, you know, from New York to New Jersey. I lived in New Jersey. I grew up in Jersey. Puerto Rico, maybe 3 hours the most. So this was the longest flight I've ever been on, almost a full day, 24 hours. And you're not in first class. I just want to let you know. Well, we got to Saudi Arabia, and we had a formation. You can see the Humvees in the back. Actually, our Humvees were green. We had to take, they had to take paint and paint them tan color. And one of the things they did on the Humvees, we actually put a little Miami Dolphin on the back corner of our Humvees. I have some coins over here that we made, and that we on there specifies, the little Miami Dolphin, that we were from Miami Marines. While we were there, guess who showed up? General Gray. It was so interesting that he showed up. Most of the people that were in my unit, out of the 240 out of Miami, were, I'm going to say about 85, 90% were Hispanic. From the Caribbean, from Central America, South America, and majority of the time they spoke their first language was Spanish. And when General Gray showed up, they grabbed him and they treated him like he was like our grandfather. He was just looking at us like, what's going on? We were hugging him and just cheering him on and just grabbing him. He was just like, wow, what's going on? It was so funny. But I think everyone has customs and heritage, but we just felt like he was our father, our grandfather. And as your young kids, we're all 18, 19 years old. This General Gray is probably, at the time, probably in his 60s, and or late 50s, and we just hugged on him and loved on him. He was just smiling away. And one of the things to make ourselves feel at home, my friend Tony Corona right here, he was a good artist. We ended up making a little sign. We put the city of Miami, Bayside, Calle Ocho, and so when we walked to the rows of our tents, as we go down, everybody had rows, and we get to our row. This was our lane. We made it. When we were waiting, we were setting up before we went off to war. This is where we had a little sign. We got some wood and we got some markers, and we try to, make ourselves feel at home as much as we can in the middle of the desert. Operation Desert Shield was the first part. It was Operation Desert Shield, Desert Storm, Desert Farewell. There's 3 actual campaigns. On my ribbons, the one for that campaign, I have 3 stars for each of those events. August 2nd, 1990 to February 17th was Operation Desert Storm. One of the things that the Republican Guard and Saudi Arabia, they had Scud missiles. And one of the things that we learned before we went to war is, remember this, if you know history, Iraq and Iran had their version of their Vietnam War. They had an 8-year war, right? From 1980 to 1988, 89, roughly around there. And at the time, the Republican Guard was the elite forces for Saddam Hussein. They were their top, their top dogs. There was over 100,000 of Republican Guards. In the Middle East region, they were the #1 army in that area. Number 2 was the IDF, the Israel Defense Force. Israel Defense Force was number 2 at that time, and the Republican Guard was number 1. The things, what did they have? They had advantage because they just finished an 8-year war. They are combat tested, combat proven, and here we are. I'm 18 years old, 19 at the time, sorry, and I've never been to combat. I didn't have any experience. They've been going through combat for 8 years, so they were really battle tested. One of the things Saddam Hussein decided to do was he decided to light up the firewells. He figured, if I can make a cloud of darkness, I'm going to light all these firewells up and create a cover and distraction for, basically, when we come in, we could not see the enemy tanks. If you read about the history, they say, oh, well, we had superior power. We had the M1 Abrams tanks. I'm going to tell you right now, a lot of people don't know this. I'm actually writing a book. We did not go in with M1 Abrams tanks. We went in with the M60 tanks. M60 tanks are the tanks that were used in Vietnam. When we crossed the line of departure at 03 in the morning, it was the Reserve Marines, the M60 tanks, and not the M1 Abrams, like they may have told you on the news. The reality was, we went in with these tanks, and they didn't have any armor plated like the M1 Abrams. We would always tease the M1 Abrams. We would say, oh, what do you have, a microwave and a TV in there? Because they were so high tech. They're faster, they're more agile, they shoot the better missiles, everything. The M60 tanks were proven, battle proven, yes. You're talking about 1990, 91. These tanks are Vietnam. 1969, the year I was born, right? So we did have a disadvantage. And one of the things, though we had a disadvantage with this darkness in the clouds, as you can see in this picture here, I am a Christian. I believe in God. And you know, it's amazing how many people say, I'm atheist, I don't believe. But you know, when you're in combat, I didn't see any atheists at all. Everybody wanted to pray. Everybody was talking about God. They may say when they're here and they're not involved in a tough time or a bad situation, but when you're going through a struggle or a situation, you say, you know what? That's when you sit back and say, you know, there's got to be somebody higher than me. So it says right there, Psalm 91. I had that actually printed on my helmet, Psalm 91. 1,000 may fall to my left and 10,000 to my right, but nothing shall come to me. I also had Psalm 23. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. A shadow can never injure you. You know, a shadow may, you know, there's a picture of there's a little tiny cat, but the shadow looks like a big lion and people are freaking out. But when they look at the shadow, say, that's not going to happen. So I had that prayer on one side, Psalm 23 and Psalm 91. And I'm kneeling and I'm in the position of a prayer. There's actually a famous picture of a Vietnam Marine in this position, kneeling and praying. And there's they added the Marine Corps prayer. So I did that at that time. Is that famous? Someone just raised their hand. Someone had a question? I just saw somebody's hand go up. Am I seeing things? Okay. No questions? I saw it from the corner of my eye. Okay. So that was during that time. The foxholes, let me see something. So we had to dig foxholes because the Scud missiles were coming in. And we did a lot of training and we saw a lot of videos. I know people say, oh, there wasn't no weapons of mass destruction, this and that. Well, when I was in training, we got video footage of the people that were killed on the streets of Baghdad and in the different regions, not Baghdad, in the regions of Iraq. I didn't put the picture up there, it's a little graphic, but there's people all over the ground. They're just holding their kids and they're laying flat on the ground. We were basically trained up, prepared to prepare ourselves for those weapons of mass destruction. And I was in MOP level 4, which is a gas mask, a full uniform, rubber boots, rubber gloves. And when we went into combat at 03, I had that on for the first 8 hours, concealed. Once we got the all clear, I did take off my gas mask, but I stayed in that uniform or that protective gear the entire time during the war. I didn't take it off because I didn't want to start putting all that on because it takes so much time to put on. I just had to grab my gas mask, put my hood over, protect myself. But I did wear that protection gear because we had the intel and we had the footage and videos of people that they used chemical weapons on them. And people say, oh, it never happened. Yeah. And they had a video of a milk factory, and it was interesting. You're Arab, but yet when they showed up to the factory, it said milk factory in English. But the intel showed something. Now I know people later years say, oh, there was nothing, there was nothing. There's conflicting stories on that, but you know what? I saw the footage. I wanted to protect myself, and I did. So also, while those Scud missiles were landing around us, we built foxholes in the desert. I would dig a foxhole every single time I stopped. And after time after time after time, it got so like, oh, another hole, I gotta dig another. Now, you're talking about a little shovel, it's like this big, it's called the E-tool. After you unfold it, it's only about this tall. So you're not having a big shovel where you can just dig normal. It's a little tiny shovel, and it takes time. So one day we made a hole, Pete Zayas and myself, Lance Corporal Zayas, and I made the hole just enough for maybe one person can fit in there. And we had a Scud missile alert. We both ran, took off the doors of the Humvee. We jump in this hole, we put it over our foxhole, and we sit there. It took an hour to be all clear. We were so tight. Pete Zay is about 6'5", I'm only 5'7", and I was crunched up. My knees were to my chest, but you're so scared, and you're just holding on, and you're just praying and saying, I just hope one of those missiles don't land and hit us. Well, the all clear came out. I remember getting out of the hole. I took 2 steps, and I fell over. Pete took 2 steps and he fell over. I don't know if you ever slept wrong and your arm has fallen asleep in the middle of the night and your whole arm is dead and you try to, and it just falls. Well, that was from my hips down to my toes. I fell asleep and I couldn't, I just walk, just laying on the ground trying to kick my legs, and I couldn't until the blood returned, and then the pain goes through, the pain that you get through the muscles, and once the blood refreshes, then I was able to walk. And I learned that day that I'm not gonna cut a corner ever again. I started digging my foxhole, even though it was a pain in the butt, but just in case something happened. The thing about the war, it was a coalition of 35 nations. It was the biggest. General Schwarzkopf in the Army was in charge, and we had a lot of nations that joined together, so you felt confident. It wasn't just one of these campaigns that it was just one country against another, but it was a multiple different nations that fought this war to liberate Kuwait. On January 17th, the war kicked off. We call it the 100-hour war. That's when the air campaign started. There was airstrikes. This is a picture over Baghdad. I'm sure my sister's in the crowd and her husband. I'm sure she remembers watching the news that night and seeing the Iraqi shooting at as our airplanes were flying over Baghdad and bombing strategic points in the city. This was a shot, basically a shot showing their artillery rounds shooting in the air, trying to take out our missiles and air defense. The war started, and like I said, we left the line of departure at 03 in the morning, and we were about 2 days in. In those 2 days, I didn't sleep. I was in that vehicle, the picture of the Humvee you guys saw. I would say that was my living room, my dining room, my bedroom. That's where I was sleeping and doing everything in that vehicle. We're up for about 2 days, and then I remember Lieutenant Addis came to us and says, hey, I need to talk to you. I have some good news and bad news. He says, the good news is that we are kicking butt and taking names. We are moving. He says, let me show you the map. He says, you see where we're at right here? He says, we were supposed to be here in 2 weeks. We got here in 2 days. He says, the good news is, like I said, we're kicking butt, right? He says, the bad news is we left our supply chain behind. We have no water refill. We call beans, bullets, and Band-Aids, right? So whatever water you have on you is what you have. Whatever food you have on you is what you have. Whatever fuel you have left in the vehicle and in your tanks, so we had extra 5-gallon tanks in the back of fuel, that's what you have. Nothing else. So make sure you don't eat all your food at once. You kind of just like ration your food, ration your water, all those things. Of course, we didn't know it was going to be a 100-hour war. We're at the 48-hour mark right now. We didn't know it was going to be, we're thinking that this is going to be a long, drawn-out war. And we didn't know that thing. But it was pretty, it gets in your mind like, wow, okay, good and bad, right? Sometimes we get good news and sometimes we get bad news. So we have to learn to look at the bad things and say, okay, so how can I ration and make things better to figure out what's going to happen? And as we were in the desert, we were destroying tanks. We ended up, tow company in Miami, we destroyed 13 tanks. T-72s, those are Russian-made tanks. There's T-72s, there's T-82s, there's BMPs, there's ZSU 23-4. These are all the different tanks I had to memorize and learn when I was in school. I had to look at a picture and identify it. That was my test, and I had to tell all about it, and I had to identify over 100 different tanks to pass the test to recognize recognition. But they had that tank. We studied that, and I remember we captured one morning over 1,800 prisoners. And it was so overwhelming. We was like, tell them, go, keep going south, keep going south. And I remember one guy shows up and he has a Chicago Bulls shirt on. I'm like, everybody is in uniform, like military green uniform, And this guy has a Chicago Bulls shirt on, and I'm like, hey, what do you do? And I start speaking to him English. He goes, man, I'm from Chicago. I came here on vacation. And Saddam Hussein put me on the front line. I was like, what? He goes, yeah, I've been waiting to get home. I found that so entertaining and funny. I remember just laughing. I was like, wow. I said, well, dude, you need to go south. And, I said, once they get you, they're going to give you food. They're going to give you water. They're going to take care of you. I'm sure once they vet you, they'll figure out a way to get you back. I don't know if the guy ever made it back to the United States, but I'm sure he did. And he was saying, man, he was so happy to see us. He was visiting family there, and that happened. So that was an interesting thing that took place. I remember after they left, it's almost like I told somebody, as soon as all the enemy moved out, we started getting artillery coming in on us. And there's a thing that the enemy, or any military doing artillery, it's called walking it up. So what they do is they shoot a artillery round, and they hit their place. So they knew what these guys gave up. So they probably said, hey, we're here. And they give an 8-digit grid. And they give their location. So they hit a bomb. And then the next one comes a little shorter. And it keeps on walking it up. So as they moved out, all of a sudden we start hearing artillery coming in. So we start moving. And the bombs are landing behind me. And left and right. I'm like, go, go. I tell my driver, go, 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 go. We got to move forward. We can't stay where we're at, because the bombs are coming in and it's shaking the vehicle. And I remember as we're driving through the desert, we're going as fast as we could, and the bombs are coming in, and I see a tank trap. So what would you do is, the Iraqis, they dug these tank traps, and they would back up their tank into this hole, and then they would go up, shoot their missile, and drop back down and get in this, for they can be protected. So I saw one. I knew from studying intel that they would do a lot of these, and they would put anti-personnel mines where it can blow up the vehicle and kill you. So I told my driver, I call him Hot Rod, Rodriguez, and I said, stop the vehicle. I jumped out of the vehicle, ran, and I went into this ditch, and I eyeballed as much as I could to see if I could see any anti-personnel mines, because I wanted to make sure if we drove in there that we didn't blow up. I looked visually quickly, didn't see anything. I told them to come in. We went down in this. Now we're below ground, like digging a foxhole, right? Because when the artillery bomb lands, it blows, and there's shrapnel everywhere. So if you're up, you'll get injured or killed. If you're beneath the ground, it's going to blow above you. So we go in this thing, and sure enough, some rounds land left and right. Nothing happens. We eventually move out of there and start moving in, start pushing out. But that was one of the things that, it was pretty intense. After the 100-hour war, it was over. We eventually got together, and we did make it back. We went down to downtown Miami. This is my buddy Tony Corona. I was with him last night. We celebrated the Marine Corps Ball down in Miami. We're celebrating, excited. This is Neighbors newspaper, Miami Herald. I'm speaking at St. Bartholomew in Miami Lakes, I think it was. It was interesting because we had a Navy guy, an Army guy, and then they had me speak. And after I finished speaking, my friend Pete Zayas that invited me to speak, the kids stood up and gave a standing ovation. And I said, Pete, you're next. He goes, I'm not speaking. I was like, what do you mean? He goes, after you? He says, anybody had questions? And to this day, I just laugh. And I said, Pete, you were the one that started my speaking career, because from that day on, I've been speaking ever since. And it's so interesting. And a lot of people don't know this story, but maybe you do. Maybe you saw some things that people say, oh, that's not true. Well, we were in Camp Lejeune, and there was an airplane, Trump Airlines came to pick us up. And they were actually hired by the government at the time to transport us. But when they came to pick us up, they send one plane, like the military paid for one plane. And when you're in logistics, you got to know your numbers. If you ever know anything about an airplane, you can fit so many people, but guess what? You have to add the pounds. That's why they check everybody's weight. Understand that we had duffel bags. Everyone had a duffel bag. When they started doing the calculations, they said, you're not going to fit. And we've only paid for one flight. It was contracted for one flight. there was a big thing. So how do we get back home? How do we get home from Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, to Miami?
Drive.
Could have drove. All I know is that my commanding general is really upset. He's actually flying down from Tennessee for our reunion. He made some phone calls. It got up to their CEO of Trump Airline, and they went and took half of us down to Miami and brought us home. And then they flew back, they picked up the Marines and brought them back. That was not in the contract, that was not supposed to happen, but guess what? It happened. Someone made a phone call. I know there's some news reports that it never happened. Guess what? I was there. I saw it happen. So if you want to believe the news, you're more than welcome to believe them. It's up to you, but I was there and I know what happened. We were sitting on that tarmac and we were sitting there for like 8 hours and nobody was going, because we were not going to send half the Marines home and leave the rest behind. When I was a young Lance Corporal, I was able to go on the first flight, and I remember and then they told us in 4 hours you need to come back and welcome the rest of the Marines as they come down. So we did. We came back and we definitely met the second group of Marines, which were the sergeants, the staff sergeants, the older staff. All the younger people got to go first, and the other people just sat there and waited. We weren't in the airport. We were actually on the tarmac. We were out on the flight line, sitting there, just waiting with our stuff. And we made it home. This year is our 35th year anniversary, Desert Storm. We were so thankful to be back. And what we did, I got the coins on the table, but we went ahead and made a coin for the Miami Marines with a toe. And on this corner right here is a little dolphin. I did bring some. It's our fundraiser to support our event. This is the other coin we made, 250 years. It's 250 years of Desert Storm. And this is the building. The first slide I showed you, we were standing, it said Miami Marines, and we were on these steps. We took a group photo. This is the Miami-Dade Military Museum. And that's where we're going to do our reunion on January 17th. Like I said, I will send all the information to Karen. Everyone here is welcome. It's going to start at 10:00. The ceremony will start at 11. And we will be honoring those men and women that served this country during Desert Storm. I just want to say Semper Fi and never forget. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I think we could turn on the lights, and if anybody has any questions, I think we have time. Yes, sir.
The vehicle carries diesel fuel, how many gallons, how much mileage do you get, how far does it go?
I used to remember all that. It is diesel. One of the things, it's not on this picture, but on the side we added little racks here on both sides and on the back, and we were able to carry gasoline. We had 4 additional big 5-gallon tanks on each side, so we had an additional 4, and then the other 2 were water. I don't remember, to be honest with you, how big the tank was, but that's a good question.
How did you get refueled?
Eventually, the refuelers did catch up to us, and they did refuel us. Once the war was over in 100 hours, thank God it was 100 hours, because if it would have kept on, we would have to stop anyway and wait for them, but they did catch up. They did refuel our vehicles. They gave us food, water, and everything that we needed to supply train, so it did happen. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
I went to a Veterans Day service this morning.
Yes.
And they were saying that people, when they see somebody in the military, they say, thank you for your service.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of that, you say, thank you for my freedom, which I thought was...
Yeah. She said, thank you for your service and thank you for our freedom. Yes. You know, you just brought up a story. I was in Iraq, and a Muslim gentleman came to me, and this is 2003, and he pulled me aside and he said, I thank you and your God for coming to this country. At first he was a little angry. He said, you knew what Saddam did to us. I went to this town where Saddam killed over 180,000 Muslims in that region. And he goes, and you guys didn't come. And he was talking about Desert Storm. I said, well, you have to understand that the thing was to liberate Kuwait. It was not to go into Baghdad or to go liberate in that area. And he said, you knew what was happening in 91 and you guys didn't come help us. That's what he told me. I apologized to him. I said, well, we're here now. I said, I pray that things get better and you're able to succeed and have a better life. But I have a video I showed to a friend of mine. She actually, at the time, worked for CNN, and the kids on the street saying, America's number one. They're yelling on the street, America's number one. I have video of that. And, you know, thank you, America, thank you, America. And I showed her that, and she goes, oh, wow, that's really good. I called her back, and she was like, I said, you going to show it? She goes, oh, it's too positive. Too positive. And I even talked to a couple people down here in the news, and I said, why is it always bad news? Can you just do one day of good news? Like, just talk about what's happening good. We hear enough complaints and, you know, this is horrible and this is, how about just saying, hey, you know what? This would happen today. This is some good news. It'd be great. But unfortunately, we work on shock jock radio waves, and we want to get attention, and that creates ratings. So they don't really care about good news. They care about bad news, because bad news creates buzz and people want to talk about that. So I said, it's pretty sad. But I have all that video. See, maybe one day someone will show it. We'll see. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, Dr. Montes.
Yes.
Thank you for sharing your story today.
Thank you for having me.
My husband is a Marine.
Semper Fi.
Semper Fi. And one of the things I was thinking that you do this for how many years, for many years, does it help you tell your story again and again? Does it help you with your, I mean, have you gone to therapy? You know, things like that after.
So I'm going to tell you, this is my second time doing this presentation. You heard some things that no one's ever heard before. I usually do 2003 Iraq. I never talk about Desert Storm. So there's a lot of things here that I've never put on video before. There's some things that you heard for the first time. I think speaking is definitely a healing. It helps. I think keeping things inside actually hurts you. It builds up. It is therapy for me. And I think the information needs to get shared and shared from someone that was there firsthand. I mean, you could listen to, I'm going to tell you a story what happened. Geraldo Rivera, this is in my book. He goes on the map in 2003 and he says, we're right here located, and this is where we're here, and the enemy's here, and all of a sudden we start getting artillery rounds coming in. All around me, and we're getting blown up. And we find out later that he went on the news and he gave away our position. If I ever meet him, I will let him know nicely. Thank God I'm still alive. But remember, everything that you see that's intel during combat, that's intel. You don't share about your position or where you're located, because the enemy's watching too. And if they can get that information, they're like, oh, well, thank you for that intel. I'm going to use it. You know, one of the things when I was to train, I was a mountain instructor, military operations and urban terrain. And one of the things I always told everybody, give me your input, give me your input. I would talk to everybody. And this young Lance Corporal says, he was like, at the time I was a company gunny, and he said, you want to hear from me? I'm like, I sure do. Because you have intel that I will never know. I said, tell me what you saw. And he goes, you know, when we were driving down this road, I saw a kid on a cell phone and he was counting vehicles. I said, okay. Did anybody else see that? No. He saw it. So I said, okay, well, we have to change our routes. We need to no longer go that road, go this way. We're going to start going around. And what happens a lot of times when that other unit got complacent and kept on using the same MSR, that's what we call it, main supply route, they watched and they ended up putting an IED and blowing up a vehicle. So I was able to get intel from that young man, and he was able to prepare me to save other people. Now, when I was gone, they didn't, you know, a lot of people, I'm in charge, I don't need to listen from you, but you know what? Everybody in the room is important. Everybody has information that can save your life. And that's one thing on leadership that I've learned, that is from the youngest to the oldest can give you some information. You got to listen. Definitely got to listen. Somebody else had their hand up. Yes, sir.
General Schwarzkopf was in control. Is he still around?
General Schwarzkopf just passed away several years ago. Something about General Schwarzkopf, I remember he took sand from Saudi Arabia, and we went to, I guess he tried to show he had sand, and they said, nope, you can't. Well, we snuck in some sand. That's on video, yes, it's past tense. We got sand. I was actually mailing it home, saying, this is Saudi Arabia sand. I don't know, do you still have sand from me? You know, yeah, I have it somewhere from there, but yeah, General Schwarzkopf was in charge of deserts.
Luke's, Florida. He lived in the place up there in Luke's, Florida.
Yeah, but he passed away several years ago.
Yeah.
Yep, General Schwarzkopf from the Army. He was in charge of the coalition of 35 different countries for Desert Storm. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
Serious question. Now, as you speak with the wars that you've been through, why was it so hard for my generation of the guys that came back from Vietnam to talk about what they saw?
So the question was, as I speak about my generation, why is it so hard for the Vietnam veterans to speak about their combat experience? The little bit that I know, I wasn't born at the time, but I know that they got ostracized. They were put down. The media really attacked them and made them feel like they were worthless. So a lot of them immediately shut the door, grew beards, and just distanced themselves because they didn't want to associate from that. I think we all go through trauma and drama, not just in combat. I mean, our mind, we have a battlefield of the mind every single day. If you went to combat or not, there's something always challenging you in your mind. We go through situations. And I think during that time, we were told as Marines or military, suck it up. You know, and I remember when I joined the Marine Corps, we're having a bad day, and they would tell you, just suck it up, Marine. You know, don't complain, don't cry, don't whine, just, you know, hold it in. And it's probably, you hear that so often, and then you just suck it up and you don't say nothing. And we know from past experience that it's not good to hold things. Decompression is important. I think also, I talked to some guys that went to Vietnam, he said when they got back from Vietnam, some of them said they would stop and they would be, it would take 30 days by ship to come back. I literally know a guy that was in a combat zone in Iraq, walking the streets, getting shot at, had a family emergency, was shipped out and back in the United States within 24 hours. You go from a combat hectic where you hear a loud noise and you jump because you're like, what is that? And now you're at the, you know, you're at the supermarket at Publix, someone drops something. It's not enough time to decompress. So that's what we're learning, and of course there's a lot of Marines veterans that I know that are doing great work to help military members go through those and talk about those serious situations. You know, anybody here has lost a family member. Just here is traumatizing. Family members that may be going through some struggling, it's tough. And you have to be able to talk about that and share and get it out. Holding it in, it's gonna really, I think it's worse for you. Stress, anger, bitterness, any of those things. But during Vietnam, a lot of that stuff did happen to them, and it suffered and it hurt them. So we learned from those things not to do them again.
Where did the greeting Semper Fi start with?
Semper Fi is a Latin word. It means always faithful, and faithful to God first, country, and Corps. I was speaking at, I was the guest of honor for the Marine Corps Ball many years ago, and I added family, because if it wasn't for family, you know, while the men or women are deployed, either that wife or that husband stays here with the kids and they're running the entire family. And that's a lot on that spouse. So we have to also remember family. But Semper Fi, Semper Fidelis, a Latin word meaning always faithful. It was in the Marine Corps ethos. It was at the beginning when they established the Marine Corps back in 1775, November 10th. Throughout the years, they have honor, courage, commitment. They have Semper Fidelis. They have different words that they call us. Obviously, they call us jarhead from the haircut. They call us leatherneck. You know where the leatherneck came from? So there was a guy named Thomas Jefferson who was anti-military, and then there's John Adams who started the Navy, right? And John Adams did the Navy. Why? Because when we were doing our supply ships, where at? In Somalia. What's going on? You know, the Houthis today. Same thing. they were actually attacking these supply ships back then. Thomas Jefferson said, "Up, let's go and get the Marines on these ships because they're getting attacked by pirates." And the reason why we have the high collars is because their custom back then was they were cutting people's heads off. Has that changed? Hasn't changed. It still happens. So the Marines ended up wearing these high leather neck collars to protect them from getting their heads chopped off. So this uniform represents so many different things. No other branch, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines. We got the blue for the Atlantic Ocean. We got the darker blue for the Pacific Ocean. I have 7 loops on my pant belts for the 7 seas that we sailed. This emblem here is the original Eagle, Globe, and Anchor. These are the new EGAs, what we call Eagle, Globe, Eagle, Worldwide National Service, Naval Tradition with the anchor, and representing the nation. We have the blood stripe. Once you become an NCO, a non-commissioned officer, so I'm a there's officers that are commissioned and there's non-commissioned officers. I am a non-commissioned officer, and the blood stripe was from the Battle of Pocatepetl, and it was the blood that we shed. And it was, at that time, it was one of the bloodiest battles. So that represents that. No other military branch, when you look at their uniform, represents what the Marines represent. There's a reason for every single detail on this uniform. Just different than any other branch.
What did you say, the battle of what?
I messed it up. It was Mexico, Pocatepetl.
Oh, I never heard. Okay.
I always mess it up because it's so difficult.
Is that where the halls of Montezuma?
The halls of Montezuma's. So you know the thing, right? From the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli, we will fight our country's battles in the air, on land, and sea. First to fight for right and freedom, and to keep our honor clean. We are proud to claim the title of the United States Marines. That's the first of the Marine Corps, the Marines hymn, the first verse. Yes, ma'am.
Just a fun fact about Marine tradition, with unfailingly at 12:01 a.m. on November 10th, even if we forgot about it, one of my husband's buddies would call us in the middle of the night and scream at us, "Get up, get up, get up, what are you doing?" And I'm like, "Oh, what happened?" So that was one of our wonderful traditions.
November 10th is the birthday. You ask any Marine, when is the birthday, they're going to tell you. I asked my Army buddies, the guy told me January 17th, 1974. I'm like, what? He goes, my birthday. I said, no, not your Army birthday. This was like literally 2 days ago. I think the Marines are made a little different. We do have a history. I remember we do have to learn history in boot camp, and we have a 100-question test. And we talk about everything that ever happened in Marines. We kind of remember the history and tradition and what we've been through in the battles. That's it. Yes, Karen?
Are there women Marines?
Yes, there's women Marines. When I joined the Marines, it was called WMs, Women Marines, but someone said, oh, that's not right. We can't use WMs, so they just call them Marines now. They don't call them Women Marines. They don't call them male Marines. They just call them Marines. We're all Marines. The ratio, officers first, in the entire military, there's 3.8% officers in the military for all branches. And people say, why so low? Because that's how many people sign up. It's not, you know what I mean? That's what it is. So the other 97 or 96.8 are males. Not many women join the military, which is okay. Yes, ma'am.
What are the duties of an officer?
Well, the duties of an officer is to listen to the enlisted person. Because if they want to survive, it's a joke, I think lieutenants always listen to their gunnies because they have more experience. An officer is in charge. So this whole group here, the officer will be in charge of the entire group, leading them, directing them. But they have an enlisted person, which really does all the work. He just basically gets all the credit. If you look at the military, usually the officers get all the awards, all the accolades. The enlisted never, they don't get anything. But everybody knows who really does the real work. That's why enlisted always say, don't call me sir. I work for a living, as a joke. But it's all in fun, thing. There's nothing wrong with being an officer. We need that. And it's important for the military to have leaders in every position. But I think, like I said, as young as a Lance Corporal is a leader. Everybody, in whatever position they're in, they are a leader in their own rank, in their situation that they're dealing with.
So when my nephew came home from the Marines, he came home in civilian clothes. How come he couldn't wear his uniform on the flight?
So they made changes because the rules, and they said no uniforms. As time goes on, different generals they make different policies. I remember flying in uniform for my grandfather's funeral when I flew to New Jersey. But then as time went on, they said you can't be in uniform at all. Just the policy changes, time changes. I mean, one general came in, we used to roll up our sleeves, and he said nope. So everybody had to go sleeves down and no sleeves up. And then the next general came and said nope, we're going back. So things, policies change. Different leaders, things changed. People try to make it better. Some people make it worse. Some people make it better. So it goes up and down in the military.
Yeah, well, we were waiting for him to come down from the
Yeah.
Phoenix. Like, where's your uniform?
Yeah.
Can't wear it.
Can't wear it.
Why?
Yeah. Can't wear it.
Well, but also times and conditions change too.
Yes.
Not just the commandants and all the leaders, it's what's going on around. too.
Yeah, sometimes you're a target.
Exactly.
So they say, hey, don't wear it because if someone sees you, there's some people in the United States that hate military people, and they'll do anything to try to take them out. So you identify as a military member, and they may try to, so it's a safety situation as well, because we get the chatter. So intel comes in, and they hear stuff. Like there's some things that happen. I have friends in the Pentagon. There's some things that happen, and they tell me, oh, you know how we found out about this guy? We were listening in on this person, and we heard a chatter about this, and we found out, and we exposed this. The last election, they were going to blow up sightings. Campaign, when you go in to vote, there was word that from the Middle East that they were going to do that. And they found out. There's a lot of different things that trust me, you see this cell phone right here? It's listening to you, okay? You know that, right? They're listening everywhere, so just remember.
Even when it's turned off.
If it's off completely, I don't think they're listening, but they are listening, just to let you know. Yes, ma'am.
Where are the marine hotspots right now in the world?
Where are we in the hot spots right now?
Where is the most, where are you mostly now?
Right now, there's a big buildup, we know, south of Puerto Rico. We know about what's going on with the, in Venezuela. So I worked for Hollywood for 30 years. A lot of people don't know this, but every Friday we would have 15 to 20 people die from fentanyl. You don't hear the news. We would give out so much Narcan, and I brought back a lot of people. And a lot of people were too late. So the Chinese, this is what they're doing. They know that they have to kill from 18 to the age of 45 males. How do you fight a war against America? Well, you make fentanyl. And what do? You send it to Mexico. And what does the cartel do? They bring it in. We have an open border. It floods the thing. They have killed millions of Americans. And understand that it's not just, you say, oh, they're druggies, they deserve it. No. I have a friend of mine that called me crying the other day and says, my friend's granddaughter was at University of Florida studying, and she took a pill, Ritalin, to stay awake to study. It was laced with fentanyl. She died. Well, understand that it's killing so many Americans. And the longer you keep that border open, people say, we gotta let them. No. People are dying left and right. It's called narco-terrorism. And they make billions of dollars. And there's been police officers that come and touch it. And there's video. They touch it, and it's transdermal. It goes right through your skin, right into your blood system, and they, boom. If you don't get them Narcan to reverse the effects of the opiates, they die. That's why most police officers carry Narcan, and they're able to give it to their officers. That's why you see them a lot of times now wearing the black rubber gloves. Because when they're doing searches, they got to make sure that there's none of that thing. And it's killing a lot of people. And China knows what they're doing. They know what they're doing. They're fighting. It's almost like what we did, how we fought our war against Russia and Afghanistan. If you know history, we supplied Afghanistan with everything they needed to take out Russia, right? We didn't fight physical hand in hand, but we sent what we needed. China's sending the drugs to China from Mexico. I always say China, Mexico, Hollywood. But unfortunately, it's every single city in the United States. Every single city. It's a shame. Hopefully, we can curve it and things will change. But they know what they're doing. They're trying to take out our men fighting age to ruin our country. And life is precious. It is truly a gift. And when you hear stories like that, University of Florida girl that just was trying to study. That's why my daughter's in college. She's 20. I said, you do not take a vitamin C, a Tylenol, a gummy, anything from anybody, because you don't know if it's laced with fentanyl, because once you do it, that's it, it's over. If anything you get, you make sure you get it from the store and it's closed and, prescription from the doctor. And don't get it from a friend. Oh, you need to study. A lot of people take Ritalin to stay up and study. I've never taken that stuff. I know people that I've seen being on calls in Hollywood, and they tell me they're on it or they're on gummies or something like that, and you see the reaction. It's really bad. Anyway, did that answer your question? Any other questions?
I can't carry her back.
You.